What's going on, guys? UFC 303 is officially behind us, and I did want to jump on here and give you some of my thoughts on how I viewed it, what I thought about the card in its totality, some news and notes, and obviously a huge controversy, a huge rivalry now that is reborn and rekindled due to the MMA community. Whether you want to think it's nuts or not, we're going to talk about it, and I'm going to give you my honest viewpoints on what side I think is right. And how we can fix this going forward, how we could settle this once and for all. UFC 303, I thought, was very underwhelming. And it not only was because we didn't have a great card, and I'm being transparent, overall, our performance on the card wasn't that well. But it wasn't a international fight week vibe to me. You know, and I understand it was the UFC did a fantastic job. This is not an indictment on them because they had the card that they wanted, and it's out of their control that certain fights fall out. And obviously, Conor McGregor, we all know, is not reliable. So it wasn't the card that we expected. And when you are getting hyped for a card, and when the UFC model is marketing a card, it's the build-up, the build-up, the build-up, the build-up, the build-up that obviously gets us all excited, right? Well, there would be a build-up, and then there would be a hold, and then there would be a build-up, and then there would be a hold, and then there would be a build-up, and there would be a hold. So we really didn't have that time to let it like resonate with us and sit down for a month and say, I can't wait for this card. It was just changing and flipping and changing and flipping. So it kind of had a weird vibe going into it. You know, and then the whole mishap with Brian Ortega, you know, during the actual card, it was just like, this is exactly how this card needed to play out. You know, so from the UFC standpoint, I think they did a fantastic job doing the best that they can with the tools and the mechanisms that they had at their disposal. But from a performance standpoint, I don't think it was a very good card. And that's just my personal opinion. Maybe you guys thought it was better. Maybe guys who did really good at the betting window or didn't have much of Brian Ortega in DraftKings, maybe you guys thought it was fantastic because you were looking at it from those optics. But as a fan sitting down watching the card itself, I think we can all kind of agree, kind of underperformed a little bit. You know, a few talking points I do want to discuss. Some of my takeaways. First takeaway is obviously the fighters I just talked about. You know, you got to give Diego Lopez a lot of credit. I know a lot of people are giving Dan Ige a lot of credit, and we're going to get to that in a moment. But, you know, for what Diego Lopez went through, you know, in this camp, just the ups and downs and the changes and the changes in plans and in the biggest spot in his career, I mean, it's pretty spectacular. It's pretty amazing, to be honest with you. This is a guy who obviously, he was on the board, Brian Ortega. Brian Ortega comes in, he misses weight by 10 pounds. Now that fight from 145 goes to 155. Then the night of the fight, after he clocks in at 155, he comes to the arena and he finds out that Brian Ortega is not fighting because Brian Ortega has 103 fever and he's sick. So now they're shuffling and they say, well, but we do have another opponent from you. But now from the 145 to 155, now you're going to have to fight over 160. This kid just took the fight and said, yeah, let's do it. Whatever you got for me, let's do it. I mean, that right there, I mean, we're going to get to Dan Ige, but that right there, that's a kid, that's a company man. On the Dan Ige side, what can you say about him? This is a guy who literally 4 blocks away, on 4 hours notice, is watching the card, finds out, messages Hunter Campbell and says, please do not take this opportunity away from me. I am in shape and I am ready to go. I can beat this guy. And he gets in his car, gets the team together, and they go out and they come to the arena and they get ready, they weigh in, they get ready to fight. So both of these guys literally have carte blanche, at least for their next fight going forward. I'm not saying for the rest of their career, they're going to have carte blanche. They're going to be able to call their shots, and Dana White's going to be like, well, you did this for me. I'm going to do all these things for you. But for the present time, these guys, I mean, they stepped up. They saved an already crumbling card. A card that was in chaos, a card that was in so much disarray. These guys stepped in, and these guys said, look, let's just do this. Let's get this fight. Let's save this card and get it over it. So credit to them. You know, really, both of those guys. Danny Ige is one of the nicest guys on the planet. Tough guy. Won the 3rd round. And what can you say about Diego Lopez? Just his star continues to rise. You know, another fight that I want to hole in on a little bit is the Ian Garry fight. To me, Ian Garry lost some stock. He did win the fight. He did show some wrinkles in his game that I did like. I enjoyed watching. I know a lot of people were giving him some crap for certain submissions and stuff that he wasn't able to cinch up and finish. The fact of the matter is, guys, this is a newer wrinkle in his game. This is a guy who's ultimately a striker, but he's trying to well-round out his game. And I thought he did a pretty good job with the time on the ground that he had. He did make mistakes, but he's not, like I said, he's not this big seasoned veteran of a grappler. But he did not do the things he said he was going to do. He said afterwards, I was going to be patient, and it's all about MVP beating him was patience. He was a little too patient. Like, nobody was really going for it. We know MVP style. We know MVP is kind of in and out. He throws one punch. He throws one punch. He throws two punches. We know he's not a volume hog. We know that Garry has the ability to throw 3, 4, 5 punch combinations together. He's done it numerous times. He did not do that. He did not pull the trigger. A lot of people did argue that MVP won a boring fight. And you know what? My breakdown, I said I could see this being a split decision and maybe him not dialing in MVP quick enough and dropping a decision to him. And there were people that do think that MVP won that fight. I'm of the assumption I don't care. I think it was close enough where you can't argue either way. I don't think you could be proud that Garry won, and I don't think you could be proud if MVP won. I think that it was a very underwhelming, underperforming fight on both ends, and I'm not mad either way. I can make an argument for both guys winning that fight. The other one is Macy Chiasson, I should want to pronounce that right, Macy Chiasson, versus Myra Bona Silva. I see a lot of people out there that were picking Myra Bona Silva. I was on the Macy Chiasson side of that, and the reason why is I described her as like the female version of Tim Means. How this is a girl who will be a bully. She may not be the strongest woman in the world, but this is a girl who will get into the foxhole with you. She will throw nasty elbows, and she will get dirty with you. And I called her elbows to be a big, big factor in this fight. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, Bona Silva was winning the fight. She should have won the fight. I got robbed on a bet here. I got robbed here. It's not the way fighting works. It's the way you finish. That cut was delivered by a nasty elbow. That fight should not have continued. It could have continued. They could have let it to continue. But here's one point that a lot of people aren't bringing up. The doctor, if you listen to the doctor in the corner, ultimately that's the doctor's call to be like, look, she can't go on anymore. The doctor was like very hesitant. He was kind of giving the leash to the referee, telling him like personally me, that cut's bad. It's going to go all in her eyes. And, personally, I don't know what you want. It was like literally giving the ref the leash to make the decision. And then finally he came out and says, personally for me, I don't think she should continue. And that's when the ref waved it off. But initially when the doctor was talking to the ref, if you go back and listen to that, he was kind of giving the leash to the ref saying like, it's a bad cut. It's going like he didn't personally want to make the call. He didn't know if he should make the call. I am under the assumption that cut would have just got worse and worse and worse and worse, and I don't mind the stoppage at all. And it's not because I picked Macy Chiasson, so don't go into the comments and say, well, you picked her, that's why. I personally don't think that was a terrible stoppage. Let's jump right into the main event because this is really what I want to talk about. So when you look at the Poaton and the Garry fight, the first time they fought, if you guys remember my breakdown, if you listen to my breakdown, or if you're a member, you saw that I said that whoever picks Garry in this fight it's just a diabolical pick. It's a maniacal pick. It's crazy. And the reason why I said that was not because I didn't think Garry was good. It was because I looked at Garry as a guy who was coming off of a terrible injury. Dana White claimed it to be one of the worst injuries he's ever seen to his shoulder. All this downtime, and you're fighting a guy who is a chess master in striking. And I was like, this is just crazy. How can people honestly believe that they understand? Like, you don't even know what you're going to see from Garry. You don't know if this guy's going to come in with a new style because he has to avoid his injury. You have no idea what you're looking at. Like, you have no idea when he steps in that cage and there were people on him because they bought into this samurai way. They bought into this facade. They bought into this image that he portrays, and he's a good guy. You could see when you talk to him, Garry is like a good guy. Like, you can see generally from his heart, like he's not a bad guy. He's not a malicious guy. He doesn't trash talk. He gives everybody the respect that they deserve. But I think everybody bought into this like samurai way with him. And I was like, this is just people who actually picked him to win the first fight. I was like, you kind of get discredited a little bit. Like, I got to take a little step back and say, like, do you really know what you're watching here? But now in the second fight, I didn't change my tone, but I did say you can now start to make a little bit of an argument because now at least you've seen what you've seen. You've seen him fight Poaton one time and lose. You've seen him fight Alexander Rakic, and he was losing that fight until he wasn't anymore. But at least you got something to look at, right? You got something to gauge. You got something to look at, and you can make your assessment from there. If you're going to continue to ride down that path and believe that Garry was going to beat him, then so be it. But like I said, at least you got something to shoot from. I just don't know how you pick against this guy. And I was saying that in my breakdowns and stuff. Like, how do you pick against a guy who beat you already, number one, who, when you came back after that fight, you showed the same exact mistakes that you did in the first fight and in all your other fights that you didn't correct, which is the leg kicks. The guy does not check leg kicks. And, you know, that was one of the focal points of Poaton in this fight, that he said he saw a video of him trying to check leg kicks and the form was completely off and he kept dropping his hands. And he said, when he goes to check the leg kicks, I am going to come up with a high kick and I'm going to see if it connects. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, it's exactly what happened. Garry just did not look like a good fighter in there like last night. He really, really didn't. The thing that the Poaton backers needed to, you know, kind of be concerned with was if he gets reckless and he charges the pocket and he catches him with something, then yes, he's a powerful guy. He's a big guy, 6'3", 205. He probably walks around 235, 240 in the offseason. He connects you with something. 37 years old, Poaton doesn't have the greatest chin in the world, but there's 1,000%. It's a fight. You can drop him. But from a technical standpoint, there was no possible way that you could look at that fight and say, yeah, he's the better fighter, because he's not. He's a very overrated fighter, and he's not overrated in the means of like the real MMA masses, right? Like the real MMA masses know, like, let's slow down. Like, you can't keep jumping on these guys. Let's just slow down a little bit. It's the newer people that buy into these facades and buy into this marketing, and he's a samurai warrior and stuff. You know, the minute that I heard him talking about spirits and magic, like, that was the mental component where I was like, he's broken. Like, this dude is shook by this. This is a guy who really believes that stuff. If you know anything about Garry and you studied him and you not studied him, but watched his demeanor, he really does live that life. Like, he goes into 72 hours of seclusion, into darkness, and he goes into the water, and he still trains old school up in the woods and the mountains, and he still believes in all these things, like honing in energy and, he does that thing where he does the fire to get rid of the witches. Like, he really believes in this stuff. So he really had this instilled in him that, like, I just want a one-on-one fight because this guy brings magic into the cage. He brings spirit into the cage. Now, for me, this is for me, and I know this isn't Poaton's personality, but if I was his coach, if I was on his team, I would have told him to play that up. Like, play this up. Give this spirit a name. Say this spirit came to you when you were like 12 years old in a dream. You've been friends ever since. Like, play this thing up, because this guy is really thinking about this. Like, he's really thinking that when you come into the cage, you bring some kind of spirit with you, some kind of magic with you. Well, that right there showed why he was so tentative. He was so uncertain about himself. He was so uncertain about what was to be. And it was like, how do you pick a guy like that? Like, how do you pick a guy when this guy is already talking like he's asking another fighter, can we have a one-on-one fight? Can we have a one-on-one fight? Because I know you winning fights by bringing spirit. Everybody knows that you bring spirits and you bring magic into the cage. Right there should have been your inclination of like, no, dude. Fighting is physical and mental. It's not just physical. You know, so that was that. And the great thing about that ending was, and listen, nobody wants to see anybody get hurt. But the great thing about at the ending, there were so many people out there that said that it was stopped early, the first fight, that he was losing the first fight, that Garry was winning the first fight, yada, yada, yada. And now watch with the grappling and the grappling and the grappling. There was such a decisive win here. It was such a decisive victory that literally they shouldn't even got him off the ground. He should have literally got the stool, picked him up, put him on the stool, you know, put some ice in back of his head. You don't just pick a guy up. Herb Dean stopped that kind of late, to be honest. Right after that head kick, that should have been donezo. There should have been no reason why Poaton had to jump on him. And Poaton wanted to back off. You could see he kicked him, he went down, and he froze. And when Herb Dean didn't go rushing in, then he's like, he did his job. He went in there and he tried to finish him. But you could see he had ultimate concern on his face, because you never really see Poaton do that after a knockout, go walking over to the opponent to like see, is he okay? And Herb Dean kind of pushed him away. So now you know, now decisively you could say, so where does Garry go from here? Nowhere. This is what I mean. This is a guy who, like I said, now the aura of this guy kind of just dissipates a little bit. Now the casuals will jump onto a new guy. There will be a new guy now that comes out that they're going to be like, oh, this is the guy, this is the guy. And why do I say does he dissipate a little bit? Because he's fought for the belt 2 times and he's lost horrendously 2 times. Okay, he fought Poaton once, he lost horrendously. He fought, and you could say it was a late stoppage, whatever, early stoppage, whatever you want. The fact of the matter is Poaton landed in his guard. I mean, landed in full mount. The fight was over. So instead of giving this guy more damage and finishing him further, it was a fine stoppage. It was a fine stoppage. But now he's lost to the champion 2 times. There's not a third time. Like, there's not a third time. So until he loses the belt, he's kind of on the back burner. Like, I could see maybe Garry fighting, Jamal Hill. I could see Garry beating Jamal Hill. But he's on the back burner now. Like, he's on the back burner now. If Poaton loses the belt in his next fight, if it's Ankalaev or someone, then, maybe he works his way back up in discussions. But for the time being right now, like, Garry's title shot days are over until Poaton is over. Because, or Poaton leaves the division, tries to try his hand up in heavyweight, or he just leaves the game altogether. He's 37, 38 years old. So the talks of Garry now are gone. And now you're going to see the talks about Garry being this samurai warrior gone, and they're going to jump on to the next guy. Maybe it'll be Ankalaev. Because first it was Jamal Hill. Everybody was all over Jamal Hill. Jamal Hill. And then it was Garry. He disbarred both of those guys. Now maybe it'll be Ankalaev. And Ankalaev is a good fighter. This is a guy who legitimately has good wrestling. He deserves a title shot. So we're not going to get into the breakdown of that fight. But I find that kind of interesting. I do find that fight interesting. But here's where the controversy starts. Now, the Garry backers and the Hill backers, all the people who really they feel kind of shame in a way because all their heroes got completely destroyed by this guy. Now they're trying to discredit Izzy from his win against Poaton, which I find absurd, literally absurd. And it shows when you really talk. I wish I had some of the tweets that I could post, but like I said, I'm not in the studio or anything, and I wanted to jump on and do this. Maybe I'll do another video and I'll post some of these crazy tweets that I've read. But when you're looking at this in a whole and you're saying to yourself, you're going to discredit a guy who almost cleaned out the middleweight division, who has striking that I personally, in my all my years, he's one of the cleanest, most brilliant cage IQ strikers I've seen in a long time. And this is somebody who comes from a heavy boxing background, who I consider myself someone who knows striking. If you want to sit down and talk to me about grappling, we can have that conversation, and I'll some of your talking points may cross over my talking points and may X out some of my talking points. But when you're talking about striking, there's nobody I can't sit down with. I don't care who you are, and talk to you very knowledgeably about striking and making all these hardcore valid points. And this guy is brilliant when he strikes. Brilliant. His patterns, his philosophies, the way he moves, the way he baits traps, the way he creates angles. The guy's brilliant. His range management, everything about Isreal Adesanya is brilliant when it comes to striking. So the big controversy now, the big leverage that these people are leaning on is when people came out. There was a few people, a couple fighters, and saying, how good is Isreal Adesanya? Because it shows, okay, all these guys can't beat him. Nobody can beat this guy Poaton, but Isreal Adesanya is the one guy that didn't beat him, but literally flatlined him. Okay, so now what they're saying is well, Jan beat him. And the argument I was trying to make, and a lot of other people are trying to make that are well-versed and understand physiology and understand the genetic code of the body, were saying, well, that was at light heavyweight. Well, Poaton's at light heavyweight. Poaton's a lot bigger guy. Well, tell him to come up to light heavyweight and let Poaton beat him there, because he won't last a second with Poaton at light heavyweight. Poaton will knock him out at light heavyweight. He's a light heavyweight. This is the argument you're getting from these people. And I'm trying to explain to these people, Isreal Adesanya weighed in at 200.5 pounds in his only light heavyweight fight against Jan. He's not a light heavyweight. His body will not allow him to perform at the maximum performance, the optimal performance at a light heavyweight. His genetics will not allow him to be, in its optimal form. It just won't. It's just not the way it is. That's why there's weight divisions. So they're looking at more, and let's go to this division, and let's go to that division, and let's go to this division, instead of looking at the technical ability of this guy to do what he did. Because the fact of the matter is, a lot of people are talking about how Poaton was drained. He was drained. He didn't belong to be a middleweight. He shouldn't have been a middleweight. He's a real light heavyweight. That's the only reason why I won. That's a complete fallacy. The guy fought 3/4 of his career, including kickboxing, at middleweight. Did he grow out of his body a little bit and now he's a light heavyweight? 1,000%. Do I think he's better off at light heavyweight? 1,000%. But the guy fought the majority of his career at middleweight, and he was great at what he did at middleweight. So, you get a guy now where he comes in, and if you watch that fight again with Isreal Adesanya and him, Isreal was kind of outpointing him in the first fight. But I'm not one to worry about what you did in the beginning, like a lot of these people. Oh, he was winning the fight, and then he got knocked out. No, he got knocked out. He lost the fight. He got knocked out. The second fight comes around, and these guys fight, and the same kind of rule applied. It was the same kind of thing. Like, Izzy was kind of, getting his way with him with his points and just kind of scoring on him, scoring. And then it looked like it was going to be a complete blueprint, a complete pattern of exactly what happened the first time. You saw him get against the cage. Poaton started unloading on him, but instead of finishing the fight, he kept his composure. He played a little rope-a-dope with him, and he caught him with a fucking laser that not knocked him out, but flatlined him. Okay? And people are discrediting this guy now, saying, well, this is because it was that middleweight. It's absolutely bizarre. Don't be one of these people. Don't be one of these people. Isreal Adesanya is one of the greatest middleweights that we've seen in a very long time. Very long time. He's coming back now, and he's going to fight Dricus du Plessis in UFC 305, which is a lot of animosity involved in this fight. These guys don't like each other. And I think that Dricus does have a very bizarre style. He's got a very rugged push-forward style that people do think that he's going to give him problems. And I think that stems from the Sean Strickland fight. After he beat Poaton, he fought Sean Strickland, and he got completely worked by Sean Strickland. But I'm going to just fill you guys in on something about that fight. I like Sean Strickland. I think Sean Strickland's a dog. I think Sean Strickland's good for the UFC, and I think he's got a very good, odd style that's very hard to solve. But that was not the Isreal Adesanya that we're used to seeing in that fight. He was kind of checked out and ready for vacation for that fight. I think he took him lightly. He definitely did not look at him like himself. He didn't throw the volume. He didn't fire back. He didn't have that fire in his eye. The minute that fight started, and as it was getting deeper and deeper, I was just saying to my friend, I was saying, look, this ain't the guy. This dude is checked out. This dude is ready for a break. This guy needs some time off because this dude has checked out. And he did. And that's my honest opinion. I think that if you put these guys back in the cage together with a rejuvenated Isreal Adesanya and a primed Strickland, I think Izzy pieces them up all day. That's just my personal opinion. I do not think he was dialed or checked in for that fight in any way, shape, or form. I think he was going through the motions. I think he had some things going on, and I think he was ready. He was ready just to be like, I don't need this pressure no more. I need a fucking break. And you know what? It happens. It happens in a lot of fighters' life. He's taken time off. He's recalibrated himself. He's rejuvenated himself. He doesn't have the pressures no more of being the champion. He doesn't have a target on his back anymore. This is a good time for him. And a person like him who's so very, very intelligent, he knows how to utilize that time wisely. This guy wasn't sitting on the couch. He wasn't eating popcorn and potato chips and drinking beer. This guy was working. He was mentally working. He was physically working, all while he was rejuvenating himself. So now he's going to come in and fight Dricus, and I'm sure there's going to be loads of people jumping on Dricus. If he beats Dricus, I don't know where this all lies. If Uncle Live is going to be next, Isreal maybe loses to Dricus. I don't know. I doubt that. I'm taking Isreal in that fight. But I think that this sets up with all these crazy MMA fans, because the UFC has to do what the fans really want. At the end of the day, that's what they want, right? The media is going to not chime in what they agree with, but they're going to chime in with what you want to hear. So if you're talking about this nonsense, how good is Izzy, and Izzy's not that good, and it was because it was that, the media is going to write about it, whether or not you want to read it or not. I mean, whether or not they believe it or not, or they think you're crazy or not. They're like, this is what they're talking about. This is what I'm going to write about, and I'm going to make it sound really good too. Okay, so the UFC is, you don't think they're seeing, you don't think the workers of the UFC aren't going through Twitter going, oh my God, look at this guy. Look at what this stirred up. Look at the mass that this stirred up. That Izzy's not that good. That he's overrated. That he'd never beat him at a light heavyweight, and it was a fluke, and this and that, and blah blah blah. This is like a rivalry reborn. And the great thing about it is it's 1-1. You don't get better than that. And I'm going to say a bold statement here, the greatest grossing non-title fight that you can make is Isreal Adesanya versus Poaton, the trilogy, at a catch weight. And that's why I say non-title fight. For all the meat and potatoes, to see who really is the best striker, who is really the most dangerous man, who really won, like who was lucky, who was not. That's the fight to make. Like, that's a fight I want to see. I can only imagine the marketing that would go into that. Showing how Poaton is just dispatched of so many people, as Isreal has dispatched of so many people, how Isreal got knocked out in the first fight, then came back and slayed the dragon in the second fight. A non-title fight at a catchweight, Isreal Adesanya versus Poaton, the trilogy. Before these guys get out of their primes, because they're both 38 and 35, this is a fight that would be one of the highest grossing non-title fights in UFC history. And you're going to see a very interesting outcome in that fight. And if that fight ever does happen, I am going to break that down in detail. But that's all I got, guys. That's something I was thinking about today. I was thinking about it last night, and I was thinking about what a mega event that would be. Just from the marketing, from the trailers, from the sizzle reels, how everybody's going to be talking, how you're going to have the one side that are going to be saying that, the weight, drained them, and the other side saying, how Israel's just a better technician. Then you have the other side bringing up how, oh my God, in kickboxing he was knocked out, and the other side saying, oh my God, well that's not MMA, that's kickboxing. It would cause a division. This is a fight that literally would cause a division in the MMA community. And I think it would be a very, very good business move on the UFC's end to make this fight and literally solidify one of these guys' legacies. I mean, it would solidify it. You got one of the guys right now who's the most feared man, where everyone thinks he's unbeatable at this point. And then you got Isreal Adesanya, who's the only man to slay that dragon. Like, the only man to slay that dragon. I don't know. What do you guys think in the comments? Let me know. I will talk to you later.